Sussan Ley is now finished and the federal Liberal Party she leads faces a wipeout at the next election. The Nationals too, with coalition voters switching in droves to Pauline Hanson's One Nation party instead. Today's news poll is just devastating for Ley and the Liberals. I mean, she's the first woman to lead the Liberals and is now proof that what counts in politics really isn't gender but real leadership. Now, after preferences, the Liberals are way behind Labor, just 43% to Labor's 57%. But much worse in these numbers is that the Liberals' primary vote is now the lowest it's ever recorded, just 24%, after it lost another 4 points in the past month, all of which went to One Nation instead, giving that party its highest ever support in news poll in more than 20 years. Or you could put it this way: of every 4 people who voted for the coalition at the May election, 1 of those 4 now won't. They are instead backing Pauline Hanson's One Nation, whose vote has gone up since the election as much as the coalition's has fallen. It's a straight switch, and for a simple reason. The coalition now looks weak, divided and too left-wing, and One Nation clearly doesn't. So this is an existential crisis for the Liberals, and simply changing leaders I don't think is going to help much, because for a start, who would actually replace Sussan Ley? I mean, Andrew Hastie still lacks the experience or media skills to pull it off and is biding his time sensibly. And Shadow Defence Minister Angus Taylor, he still, I'm afraid, lacks that leadership vibe, and I doubt is even in a hurry to inherit this mess. So really, a new face or new spin, just that's not going to save the Liberals. The coalition is instead, shock, going to have to do the hard work of changing tack, of getting on the side of the science, of history and of the national interest, and arguing for climate policies that right now seem unpopular, and arguing for them every day. Now, it's crystal clear, of course, the policies that are destroying the coalition, which I think has got to now realise, the evidence is right there, that Labor isn't the real threat now. In fact, Labor isn't even popular itself. It's got a primary vote of just 36%. So one of the 2 policies, I'd say, that are destroying the Liberals, well, one of them is immigration. The coalition just hasn't been firm or definitive about slashing immigration, like it's too scared of seeming right-wing. And the second, of course, is global warming, the disastrous net zero target. Well, once again, the Liberals have also been too scared to oppose. You know, oh, we're going to lose even more seats to the Teals if we scrap the net zero target that, hello, is driving energy bills through the roof and destroying our heavy industry. In contrast, of course, One Nation insists we slash immigration much more and scrap the net zero target that the coalition stupidly signed up to in 2021 under Prime Minister Scott Morrison. I mean, wasn't that dumb? Think about it, you know. The Liberals freaked then that if they didn't go net zero, they'd be destroyed. So they went net zero and they have been destroyed. But now this pressure from Pauline Hanson and One Nation yesterday forced the Nationals to at least cave in and drop that target of net zero by 2050. And it's instead going to cut emissions a bit less, in line with what other developed countries are actually doing and not just promising.
And I'm proud to say that our party room has got to a unanimous position of scrapping net zero commitments by 2050. We continue to believe that we need to reduce emissions, but we've got to do it in a better, fairer, cheaper way for all Australians. And what we are going to say is that we believe that we can peg ourselves to the rest of the world. We're not going to be a laggard, but we're not going to streak ahead.
Now there's massive pressure for Sussan Ley to do the same, or face a disastrous split with the Nationals, or even a split within the Liberals themselves between those who say that net zero is a disaster for Australia and those who say, well, you know, if we do that, it'll be disastrous for our party. Now, this split is so profound between Liberals who have convictions and Liberals who have cowardice that Ley and her energy spokesman, Dan Tehan, are begging for even more time to somehow muddle through and sort it all out, or wait for something to turn up, all of which just signals weakness and indecision.
I've always said it'll be 6 to 9 months. Ideally, love to be able to do it tomorrow, but I've always said we've got to get it right.
Now, let me underline this point, that none of the Liberals who say the party should keep the net zero promise actually claim, at least that I've heard, that net zero is going to save Australia from droughts and cyclones and floods and frying to death, because clearly it won't. We're too small and they know it. They're simply worried the net zero is popular with voters, and they have no faith in the Liberals' ability to change minds, nor do they seem to be bothered even trying. And I think this is the argument of cowards and opportunists, people who chase polls, don't try to shape polls. And to them I want to point out something. As I've already said, they are being destroyed right now by jumping on the net zero bandwagon, because it makes the Liberals seem fake and insincere anyway. They already lost the last election, now they look like losing the coalition as well as the next election. Now, to these poll chasers, I would point out something else that should finally, I hope, give them courage. Flash. Peak climate hysteria is over. Peak net zero is over. The world is moving on because the cost of net zero is just too high and the benefits are too small. And few people now believe all these scary claims about, we'll all fry in our beds and all that. The signs of this exhaustion with net zero are everywhere, here and abroad. Here, the Net Zero Australia Coalition of global warming and energy experts has already admitted that switching to net zero would need us to invest a colossal $7 to $9 trillion, trillion, not billion, trillion, over the next 35 years, as well as giving up the cheap fossil fuels that drive our economy. And of course, that's crazy. And remember, all that, and the climate still won't change by anything you could measure because we're too small. So former Liberal Prime Ministers such as John Howard and even Scott Morrison now are calling out the madness of spending all that money, of seeing power bills explode, and of giving up the fossil fuels that our industry needs.
I think the world is making a mistake by sort of going overboard about climate change. I'm doubtful that net zero is worth the price we're paying for it.
Times have changed. I don't think 2050 is probably any longer achievable.
I was stunned last week to see that even our public servants are being told the game is up. There's a publication called The Mandarin. It's aimed at public servants. It's got a reach of 1.5 million readers, so it's pretty big. Last week published a piece by two economics professors warning the politics of climate change, often marked by apocalyptic rhetoric, moral posturing and costly symbolism, appears to have peaked. Fun fact that they have noticed. And they're right, because people are moving on. You just look overseas. Global warming guru Greta Thunberg, she now protests against Israel instead. Microsoft tycoon Bill Gates, who wrote a book about the global warming threat, last week admitted climate change will not actually lead to humanity's demise. People will actually be able to thrive in most places on Earth for the foreseeable future. So he says, why don't we just focus more on adapting to a warmer world than trying to stop the warming? Now, everywhere you look, there is exhaustion with that net zero cult. You got Donald Trump pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement. You got fewer than 60 world leaders now bothering this time to go to next week's annual United Nations Climate Summit, this time in Brazil. Green hydrogen projects, we were told they'd be produce the miracle green power that'd save us. They've largely collapsed or stalled. European car manufacturers are slowing or scrapping their push to build electric cars. The global warming or the global net zero banking alliance, that was 150 banks or financial institutions. That's just shut down for lack of interest. In Britain, even former British Labour Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair admits that current net zero policies doomed to fail, and is right. Get this amazing fact. The world has so far spent more than $20 trillion over the past 33 years on renewables like wind and solar and so on, but their share of global energy grew by just 2 percentage points, from 12% to 14%. I mean, this net zero crusade is a fraud. Yet here in Australia, it's still treated as a holy target that's beyond reason and beyond debate. But the world is now shifting, and I'd suggest the Liberals shift with it. Or they could stick with net zero and become net zero themselves.